10 former athletes convicted of a 187. In the eyes of their fans, celebrities are often beyond reproach. If allegations of wrongdoing surface or a scandal breaks out, there will be no shortage of admirers who are ready to take to social media and defend their favorite star. It almost seems as if actors, athletes, and influencers live a life above the rules of society. But what happens exactly when a celebrity breaks the law and commits a major crime? Today, we'll talk about 10 former athletes that were convicted of murder, take a look at their cases, and see where they are now. Let's get started. Number 10. Rae Carruth. Born in 1974 in Sacramento, California, Rae Carruth has always been a promising football player. The athlete was admitted to the University of Colorado Boulder on a football scholarship, and at the age of 23, officially joined the NFL. The situation for Carruth, however, would take a turn for the worst in 1999, only 3 years into his new life. On November 19th, while near his house in North Carolina, Carruth and one of his associates attempted to execute Sharika Adams, a woman whom the athlete had been dating for a while. Adams, who was pregnant with Carruth's child at the time, was struck by 4 bullets but still managed to dial 911 and alert the police. Rae Carruth was convicted and sentenced to 18 years in prison. He has since served his sentence and was released on October 22, 2018. Number 9. Robert Rozier. More than his football career, former defensive end Robert Rozier owes his notoriety to the Nation of Yahweh, a Florida-based predominantly black religious movement with which the athlete became deeply involved in 1985. According to his own confession, Rozier might have murdered up to 7 people during the time he spent with the cult. When he was finally arrested and sentenced to 22 years in prison in 1986, the athlete agreed to testify against the religious group. He would eventually only serve 10 years of his original sentence. Even after that, Rozier couldn't completely give up his criminal life. While a member of the U.S. Witness Protection Program, police discovered that the athlete had passed bad checks for more than $2,000. Robert Rozier was eventually resentenced to 25 years to life and remains in prison to this day. Number 8. Evangelos Goosies. The story of Evangelos Goosies takes us to the Australian port city of Geelong, where the young Greek immigrant arrived at the age of 8. As he grew through his early 20s and worked a series of menial jobs, the former World Kickboxing Association middleweight champion met several members of the local criminal underworld. Goosies' connection to the Australian organized crime became public in 1989, when he was first convicted of trafficking heroin and attempted murder. The man also took part in the so-called Melbourne gangland killings and was found guilty of murdering fellow criminals Lewis Kane as well as Louis Moran in the early 2000s. Although discrepancies in the methods used for his trial emerged in 2013, and the athlete's legal team filed for a royal commission, Evangelos Goosies is still currently serving a life imprisonment sentence in Barwon Prison, a high-risk correction facility in Victoria, Australia. Number 7. Gavin Grant. The life and career of former British footballer Gavin Grant, who played on several of the country's teams including the popular Bradford City AFC, was effectively over with his imprisonment in 2010. The sentence followed a long legal battle that saw the athlete being convicted of murder he had committed over 6 years before. As per the jury, Grant and a few of his associates ambushed and killed 21-year-old Leon Labstide in what seems to have been a gang-related attack dating back to 2004. Labstide, whose murder sparked what investigators believe might have been up to 30 additional shootings, was gunned down as he left his parents' home. Following alleged police misconduct, Grant attempted to appeal his life sentence in 2014. The appeal was rejected a year later when a panel of judges found no grounds for a retrial. Number 6. Javaris Crittenton. A former point and shooting guard for several NBA teams including the Los Angeles Lakers and the Memphis Grizzlies, Javaris Crittenton had all the cards to make it into the Hall of Fame of professional basketball. Instead, his career abruptly came to an end when he was convicted of murder in 2015. 4 years before, while in Atlanta, Crittenton fired several shots at a 22-year-old woman, Julian Jones. The victim, who according to the athlete's lawyers, was not the target that the former basketball player had intended to kill. She was hit in one of her legs and perished later the same day during surgery. Javaris Crittenton was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter, as well as several unrelated narcotics crimes, and was eventually sentenced to 23 years in prison. He remains incarcerated and is slated for release in 2036. Number 5. Ugueth Urbina. Moving from the world of basketball to that of baseball, our list wouldn't be complete without featuring Ugueth Urbina Villarreal. The former pitcher from Venezuela had an impressive career before breaking the law. Urbina led the National League with 41 saves in 1999, and even went on to win the World Series alongside the Florida Marlins in 2003. According to Venezuelan authorities, however, in 2005, Ugueth Urbina attacked 5 farmers who were working on his property following the alleged theft of a gun. The athlete attempted to maim several of his employees with a machete and even tried to set a part of the group on fire by pouring gasoline on them. As a result of his actions, Ugueth Urbina was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. He was eventually released in 2012, but little is known of his current activities. Number 4. Mookie Blaylock. A troubled medical history and the abuse of alcohol might be the basis for the sentencing of Darian O'Shea Mookie Blaylock, legendary basketball player whose arrest shook fans throughout the nation. The athlete was convicted of manslaughter in 2014, following a car accident which could have resulted from his reckless driving. On May 31, 2013, Blaylock was involved in a head-on collision that left him gravely wounded while killing the occupant of the other vehicle. The athlete had been known to suffer from seizures and had been charged with driving under the influence in the recent past, although investigations into both matters ultimately proved inconclusive. Mookie Blaylock was sentenced to 15 years in prison and accepted a plea bargain. Under this agreement, he would serve 3 years, have the 4th turned into a suspended sentence, and spend an additional 8 years on probation. Number 3. Dale Crowe. Another story of drug abuse is that of boxer Dale Crowe, a former heavyweight champion who conquered his title by beating fellow athlete Greg Page in 2001. The brutal encounter, however, put Page in a coma and left him permanently paralyzed following traumatic injuries he had sustained during the fight. Almost immediately, Crowe felt personally responsible and took to blaming himself for Page's rapidly deteriorating health. The boxer set up a fundraiser in honor of his former opponent, but also began to use large doses of antidepressants and other drugs in an effort to ease his own pain and guilt. This laid the foundations for a state of mental instability that would eventually lead to him punching his best friend, 23-year-old Frank Brahman, to death during an argument in 2002. After being found guilty of the crime, Dale Crowe was sentenced to spend 20 years in prison and should remain behind bars until 2026. Number 2. Craig Titus and Kelly Ryan. The exploits of bodybuilders Craig Titus and Kelly Ryan were so popular that it gained them worldwide notoriety. For most of the 1990s, this power couple was often featured on the cover of health magazines, hired to sponsor fitness products, and discussed in tabloids all over the world. In December 2005, however, the duo collaborated to murder Melissa James, the assistant with whom Titus had allegedly had a relationship for the past months. James's charred body was found alongside Ryan's torched Jaguar in the middle of the Nevada desert. Accused of murder, both Titus and Ryan were quickly tried and sentenced to prison. They are still serving their sentence and won't be eligible for parole for at least another 10 years. Number 1. Aaron Hernandez. The criminal record of now-deceased American football player Aaron Joseph Hernandez might be one of the longest in the history of professional sports. Hernandez's legal issue started in 2007, when the then underage athlete assaulted a restaurant employee after refusing to pay his bill. The player's most popular crime, however, is definitely the murder of Odin Lloyd. In June 2013, Following several searches and interrogations, the athlete was charged with shooting his friend to death based on a series of elements that the police were able to find at his house. 5 years later, while serving his sentence in Massachusetts, Hernandez hung himself in his own cell. He is believed to have consumed K2, an illegal substance known to induce psychosis, prior to committing suicide. This is our list of 10 former athletes who were convicted of a 187.